Hi, I'm Dr. Freddie Cardoza. I serve as the chair of the Christian Education Department at Talbot School of Theology and Biola University. And today I want to share about a resource that I think has great value. It's one that I've been looking at for some time and have been using now for just into the second year. And it's something I'm really excited about. I thought it would be valuable for you to know about this resource. This is a book that has been written by two doctors, a husband and wife team, one in biblical studies, one in educational leadership, and they are the doctors Rick and Shara Melick. One serves as New Testament professor and the director of the PhD program at Golden Gate Seminary in Mill Valley, just outside San Francisco, California. And Shara, his wife, serves as the leader of the educational area at the Christian education area of that program at Golden Gate. This book is a book that's called Teaching That Transforms. You see it's subtitled Facilitating Life Change Through Adult Bible Teaching. That is a B&H Academic text. You know, this is a very interesting resource. One thing that I like about it is that, in a way not dissimilar from an earlier work by Richard Spreadfelt, Creative Bible Teaching, where they took the idea of Bible teaching and delved, unlike many books, delved into the idea of hermeneutics. What you have here is a newer version of a different type of text, but that does that same approach in that it takes the best of hermeneutics in about the first third of the book, and it treats that from the biblical studies side, and then it begins to, on the second side, talk about contextualization and how to use this as it relates to educational psychology and other areas, and then in the third part of the book unpacks a particular method and how that can be used. I found this very, very helpful. Now, one of the distinctives, or maybe a couple of the distinctives of this book, is that it comes from a genuinely evangelical perspective, a conservative perspective that has a very high view of Scripture. Here you will find a careful treatment of hermeneutics from a historical grammatical approach, one that carefully guards the authority of Scripture, but then with the same rigor goes through the second part of the book and then begins to unpack what does that look like in terms of contemporary society. What does that look like in current culture? So that's a very, very important book. Because it's newer than the one that I mentioned, Creative Bible Teaching. It has the latest developments over the last decade of what's going on in the field of higher education with regard to hermeneutics, biblical criticism, and other areas that we would be interested in. In addition to that, it's really what I think to be one of the first great treatments in Christendom and evangelicalism on the idea of adult education. You know, even though adult education as a field has been with us now for some time, it seems for some reason that the ideas that were being unpacked in the greater field of andragogy and that began to be used widely in certain areas of society, especially adult degree completion programs, etc., many of the educational institutions today still rely more heavily on really, truly, genuinely pedagogical approaches. So what we have here is the Melicks that are trying to help us unpack how do we faithfully understand Scripture, but also how do we apply that not to children, but how do we teach adults? How do we teach adults the Bible? How do we teach adults content in general that becomes transformational and that leads to personal life action? As you know, that's really a key of adult learning and adult learning theory anyway, and they begin to unpack that. So what I think is that finally we have Christian education beginning to catch up with contemporary studies and treating this idea of what adult education should look like. That's why I think it has particular value in higher education. Now what happens is, as they provide us a faithful and true guide for navigating around the areas of educational philosophy and educational psychology as it deals with adults, then in the third section, take us through what I'll call the Melick method, which is called the STAR method, and they unify two words, transformational and actional, into transformational, And it's interesting because they basically focus on the idea that the Scripture should, in fact, change lives through our teaching. So they take this and they take this method and then they use that and they take several different key elements of adult educational theory, I think about 14 or so, very key concepts that are native to the idea of adult teaching. And then they unpack what that would look like in adult teaching environments that could include local church or other kinds of contexts where Christian teaching would take place, also non-formal and formal environments like higher education as well. So it's a very interesting thing. It's something I would say there are really, I would almost say few, but I don't know if there's any resource quite like it because it's one of those few that finally treats adult learning like it should have been treated some time ago. For that reason, let me introduce it to you, and also I would like to recommend it. Now, I have a few specific places I think that this could be very valuable. One of those is I think that it has value for an applied hermeneutics course. So it may be a secondary text for something like that, so that people that are learning the specifics of hermeneutics could also understand what does that really look like, especially when we teach adult learners. The second one I would say is it would be indispensable for those who are teaching adults in church context, some type of ministry context, or in some other type of academic environment, especially those who are training adults or training teachers of adults. And those would be, I think, very important uses of it. I think it'd be indispensable that way. Another indispensable, I think, would be those who are teaching lifespan courses. You know, if you've taught lifespan courses before or educational psychology courses, you know that there's often a struggle finding the right kind of text. I think this would be a very good secondary text for that, as you would do the lifespan, do the developmental theory, do the educational psychology, but then tie that in to a practical method and then use a text like this because it drives those principles home in very concrete ways. And its appendix, I might add, the appendix is almost really worth the price of the book because it's so thorough, so rich in terms of different methods and different research that's been done. I think it's great. I think you would love it. Finally, I would say that I think it's indispensable for faculty development. In fact, I think that this is something that should be used very, very, very widely. Faculty are teaching a changing world of adults and emerging adults that is increasingly unusual because they don't understand always how to connect with them and how do we leverage our content with them and how do we make sure that learning actually takes place. And in a day in accreditation where we're talking about effective learning and degree completion rates, etc., we need to make sure that we're really connecting with the students that we're teaching. And I think this is a very, very valuable resource. And it would be useful both in the classroom, but also, again, for faculty development. And if you are an individual who doesn't hold a position like that, where you're training faculty, I would say that any person that is teaching in adult degree completion programs or that is teaching in an online environment where a lot of adult learners happen to exist, this book is really indispensable. It's something you really need. So that's a little piece. I hope that's encouraging you and helpful. You can pick that up at B&H Academic. It's a resource I wanted to share. I hope it's valuable to you. Take care. God bless.